Late July 2026, a developer hands Claude Opus 5 write access to a live production database and loses the entire thing to a single prompt. 22 tables, users, reviews, blog posts, API keys wiped instantly by a migration command pointed at the wrong URL. The agent caught its own mistake about 10 minutes later and said so out loud. The database has been wiped. This is my fault and I need to tell you immediately. Unfortunately, no backup, around 4,000 upvotes and roughly 900 comments arguing about whose fault it actually was. Here's the thing, that wasn't an idiot doing an idiot thing. That was the default behavior of a setup built from advice that had already expired. And Anthropic knows it. Their July 24th, 2026 blog post points you at the existing doctor command, now updated to comb through your configuration and flag instructions written for models that no longer exist. The company is auditing you for following its own old advice. Same day, same blog post, they admitted they deleted over 80% of Claude Code's own system prompt with no measurable loss on their coding evaluations. They threw out their own instructions. Yours are still sitting there. And the clock matters because the cheapest Claude has ever been ends on August 31st. What you build before that date decides what you pay after it. My name is Mark and welcome to the AI Bureau. If you want this stuff checked against primary sources rather than a recycled tutorial, do us a favor, tap that like button and hit subscribe. Our research team spent this week reading Anthropic's own migration documents, deprecation pages, and pricing tables so you don't have to find out through a bill. And this is not a beginner walkthrough, no tour of the interface, no explaining what a chatbot is. This is a restart. 7 things from zero for the version of Claude that actually exists in August 2026. Every technical term gets translated the second it shows up, because if you're not a developer, you're exactly who this is aimed at. And stick around for number 7, the guardrails chapter, because that's the one nobody selling you a 4-agent workflow ever mentions. Number 1, everything you learned points at the models that are dead. Claude 3 Sonnet retired on July 21st, 2025, people. Claude 3.5 Sonnet, both versions, October 28th, 2025. Claude 3.5 Haiku, February 19th, Claude 3 Opus, January 5th, 2026, and Claude 3 Haiku followed in April. The entire Claude 3 and 3.5 generation is gone from the direct API. So if you're following a tutorial that tells you to select Sonnet 3.5, you're being taught a ghost. That model string doesn't return an answer, it returns an error. So here's what's actually there. Sonnet 5, released June 30th, 2026, is your daily driver. Opus 5, July 24th, is the heavy one. And Fable 5 sits above it all, released on June 9th. While Haiku 4.5 stays on the cheap workhorse for volume. Opus 5 and Sonnet 5 both run a 1,000,000 token context window as the standard, so no surcharge. Context window just means how much it can hold in its head at once. And 1,000,000 tokens is roughly a whole code base or a stack of annual reports. Now the money, because this is where the old advice really costs you. Opus used to be the model you ration, historically $15 in and 75 out per 1,000,000 tokens. Opus 5 today is $5 in and $25 out. So the flagship got roughly 3 times cheaper while everyone was still avoiding it out of habit. Sonnet 5 is the live deadline. Anthropic's own pricing page dated July 31st, 2026 says introductory pricing of $2 in and $10 out runs through August 31st, after which standard pricing of $3 and $15 takes effect. That's a 50% increase on both sides and it lands on September 1st. Haiku 4.5 sits at $1 and $5. Fable 5 at the top, $10 and $50. Number 2, the 5 minutes that matter before you type anything. 2 settings, both default, both wrong for most people. First, training data. On August 28th, 2025, Anthropic changed its consumer terms, and the toggle that lets your chats train future models is switched on by default. If you leave it on, your data can be retained for up to 5 years. Opt out and you're back to the original 30-day window. That applies to Free, Pro, and Max, and it includes Claude code used from a consumer account. It does not apply to Team, Enterprise, or API access, which are covered by commercial terms with no training by default. Which is a slightly awkward sentence when you say it plainly. Companies are excluded by contract, but individuals have to go and find a checkbox? The second setting is permissions. Callback to the cold open. Never grant write access to anything you cannot restore. Write access just means the ability to change or delete, not only read. And notice what actually failed in that story. It wasn't the model being reckless, it was that there was no backup. Caution doesn't save you, a restore point does. Number 3, your old rules are actively burning money. This is the strongest argument in the whole video, and it comes straight from Anthropic's migration guide, dated July 30th, 2026. In their own words, Claude Opus 5 verifies its own work without being told to do so. So remove explicit verification or self-check instructions carried over from earlier models. Leaving them in causes over-verification. Think about what that actually means. That helpful line you copied in 2025 telling Claude to always double-check its output is now instructing a model that already double-checks to double-check its double-checking. So you're paying for loops that produce nothing. Then there's the stuff that breaks. If you or a tool you use sets budget tokens to control how long the model thinks, that returns a 400 error on everything from Opus 4.7 onwards. Its adaptive effort flags now. Same for temperature and top P at non-default values. It's rejected outright. And the quiet one. Models from 4.7 forward use a new tokenizer. And Anthropic says the same text can map to roughly 1 to 1.35 times as many tokens as the previous generation. That's up to about 35% more billable units for the identical prompt. So your instincts about what fits and what it costs are wrong in the expensive direction. Which is also why August 31st date bites twice. The introductory rate was offsetting and token inflation. And when the discount goes, the inflation stays. Number 4, the file almost everybody writes wrong. Claude.md is the plain text file Claude reads at the start of every session. Think of it like the briefing note you'd leave a new contractor. The mistake is treating it as an instruction manual. It's not, it's only context. Here's the rule that fixes most of them. Anything in there that is describing a process rather than a fact does not belong in Claude.md. It belongs in a skill. And a skill is a separate file that the model only opens when it's relevant. Its name and description costs about 80 tokens at the session start, and the body only loads it when it's actually needed. That's the mechanism behind the case passed around constantly, of a practitioner cutting a 180-line file down to 40 by moving procedure into skills. And there's a ceiling here that explains why bloat hurts. Frontier models reliably follow somewhere around 150 to 200 instructions, and Claude Code's own system prompt already spends a chunk of that. Every line you add competes with the lines that matter. The good version is a thin router, a few facts, the gotchas, and the non-standard conventions and pointers to skills and docs. Anthropic's updated guidance from July 29th, 2026 points the same direction. And it's durable. Agents.md, the cross-tool standard donated to the Linux Foundation's Agentic AI Foundation in December 2025, is read natively by Codex, Cursor, Copilot, Windsurf, and others. One honest note, Claude Code does not read Agents.md live as of version 2.1201, which was updated in July 2026. But running /init on a repo that has one folds it into your Claude.md. And a symlink bridges the rest. So the work transfers, but not automatically. But it does transfer. Now, before I get into the workflow numbers, if breaking releases down like this is useful to you, the AI Bureau newsletter is completely free and will show you exactly how to use this once-in-a-generation tech to its full potential. Just click the link in the description or scan the QR code that's on the screen. Now, back to it. Number 5. Workflow beats prompting, and there's a benchmark to prove it. Plan mode first, always. Let it write the plan, read the plan, and then let it run. And longer prompts are not better prompts. Past a point and you're paying for words that add nothing. Now, the mechanical bit most people have never even been told. Every message you send retransmits the entire conversation from the top. The chat feels like it remembers, but underneath it's a stateless system being handed the wrong transcript again every single turn. Which means when a reply comes back wrong, the instinct to correct it in the next message is the expensive instinct. Go back, edit the original message, and resend. The extreme version of this is documented. A single agent stuck in a retry loop, re-including the full conversation each time, burned $10 in 30 seconds. Then there's the shape that actually saves money. On July 7th, 2026, Anthropic published its own benchmark. Fable 5 as the orchestrator, planning and delegating, and Sonnet 5 as the workers executing. On BrowseComp, that split hit 86.8% accuracy at 18.53 cents per problem, while Fable 5 running everything alone scored 90.8% at $40. That's 96% of the performance for 46% of the cost. Expensive model thinks, but the cheaper models do. Number 6. Why half the internet thinks Opus 5 is a downgrade. Since launch on July 24th, the threads have been nothing but brutal. Scope creep, ignoring Claude.md, and one user on July 27th said it makes things up, skips requirements, does half the task, and then apologizes. And they followed on to cancel their subscription. Another reverted to 4.6 and called it a breath of fresh air. A thread on July 28th was literally titled, "Switch back to Opus 4.8. Look, I'm not going to be the referee in this one, but I mean the complaints are pretty clear. Stale configuration explains most of it, and Anthropic's own prompting doc names 4 behavior shifts versus 4.8. Longer default responses, more narration during agentic work, self-verification without being asked, and a greater willingness to spin up sub-agents. Every one of these fights an instruction written for 4. That's not a regression, that's 2 sets of rules arguing. And on July 29th, someone posted the receipt. They wrote instructions, skills, and memories had been built for a different family of models, and reported the scope creep stopped. Now, this is a sample size of 1, but it matches what the vendor documented the day before. Number 7, the guardrails nobody sells you. Your subscription runs on a 5-hour rolling window. It starts on your first message, not at midnight, and there's a separate weekly cap running alongside it. That pool is shared across Claude Code, the chat interface, and Cowork. So heavy use in one drains the others. And the burn rate isn't flat. Fable 5 eats quota roughly twice as fast as Opus, and a heavy agentic session can clear a 5-hour window in as little as 13 minutes. Then compaction amnesia. When a long session gets summarized to free up room, instructions living outside Claude.md get dropped. Your mid-session correction survives about as long as the summary that ate it. Output tokens cost 5 times input across the whole lineup, and thinking tokens bill as output. So the model reasoning quietly to itself is charged at the expensive rate. Which brings us to parallel agents. Creators love showing you 4 or 5 running at once, but Anthropic's own guidance says agent teams in plan mode use approximately 7 times more tokens than in a standard session, because every teammate keeps its own separate context window. 7 times the spend at 5 times the rate, with a tokenizer that inflates the count. You have to set hard iteration caps before you run anything, or simply don't run it. And here's what all 7 of those actually add up to. The skill was never prompting, it was always configuration. Prompting is rented. You write a clever paragraph, you get one good answer, and the next model makes your paragraph obsolete or actively harmful, which is precisely what happened to every always verify your output line sitting in a config file tonight. Configuration is owned. A thin Claude.md procedures moved into skills, permission scoped, a restore point that exists, and a routing habit that sends planning up and execution down. That's the part that transfers. The file format is becoming an open standard and the next model reads it too. So, everything from Claude 3 and 3.5 is retired. The lineup is Sonnet 5, Opus 5, Fable 5, and Haiku 4.5, all with the training toggle on by default until you turn it off. Verification instructions now cost you money. Claude.md is a router, not a manual, and edit and resend instead of correcting. Let the expensive model plan and the cheap ones execute. And cap everything before you run it. The setup you build this week is one still running after Opus 6, and the cheap window closes on August 31st. So, tell me in the comments, and I want strong opinions on this one. Is Opus 5 genuinely that bad? Is it worse than 4.8? Or is everyone complaining just running a 2025 config that they never touched? I read every single comment, so be sure to drop one in the section below. And if this saved you from a bill or wiped database, show that like button some love and subscribe, because we break down how this technology is advancing every single week. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. This is Mark, signing off.